Right. Hello and welcome your faces to the 40th most popular nature podcast in the Philippines. I'm back. I had a little podcast holiday throughout August, but now I'm here back to bringing you fortnightly reptile and exotic animal goodness straight to your eyes and ears. I'm a little bit rusty today. It's been a while, but it's fine. Quick note, this is a pre-recorded podcast, so although it's premiering on YouTube at the moment, we won't be responding to any comments because obviously it is pre-recorded. I'm not going to say obviously anymore. Right, let's smash through the intro so we can get our guests in. First off, a little bit of a downer to start, but it can only get better from here. During my break in August, my podcast hosting service decided to over double the hosting fees. So I am sucking up the costs, but my shoestring budget is more like a loose thread at the moment. So how can you guys and girls help? I'm not begging for money first off, but I just want to remind you, I do have a Patreon. The Patreon starts at only £1 a month. There's no other hidden fees either. You get early access to all the vlogs and any pre-recorded episodes as well. Not only that, there's a private Discord where you can chat with like-minded people, reptile people, exotic people, all that sort of stuff, and myself. And obviously, the most important thing, there are stickers. So if you're able to dip into your pocket and support the podcast a little bit more, that would be massively appreciated, more than you can imagine. But no pressure if you can't. Talking of Patreon, push that button there. There we go. Patreon supporters, you guys are on screen now. You guys and girls are making the running of this pod that extra bit easier. And I love your continued support. So thank you very, very much from the deepest depths of my heart. Next up, podcast sponsor. Oh, I pushed the wrong button. I pushed the wrong button again. Anyway, I'm very professional. As I'm sure you were aware, there seems to be a link between reptile keepers and people that have tattoos. I don't know where this love of ink comes from. I don't know the combination of ink and scales. Who knows? But the majority of reptile keepers have or like tattoos. And that is why Bobby of Rango's Tats has decided to support the podcast for the next few months. Bobby is based in Bishop Stortford at a studio called Obsidian Ink. I recently made the trip over there myself and got some sweet new tattoos, and I have just put myself in for some birthday ink in October as well, so I'm excited about that. So if you're a reptile keeper that likes tattoos or a tattoo enthusiast that likes reptiles, head over to Rango's Tats on Instagram, get chatting with Bobby. Start your message with the word ReptiChat so he knows that I sent you. And one last thing before I introduce my guest for today. My analytics tell me that 78% of recurring viewers on YouTube aren't subscribed yet. So please, if you haven't already, click that subscribe button and ding dong the notification bell. That way you won't miss any future uploads. And that's that. That's enough of me rambling. Now, today's guests are the hosts of not one, but two fantastic podcasts. Emma, among other things, is a wildlife champions coordinator for Avon Wildlife Trust. And Robi is a conservation biologist and zoologist and many other things. So, please welcome Emma Hodson and Robi Watkinson. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you very much for coming on. How are you both?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having us.
Very well, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for having us. What a treat.
I'm excited. This is a conversation that I have been looking forward to having for a long time. And it's not one that I thought would come up on the podcast, but it's evolving as it does. So we're just going to go with it. So, it's a little bit different for you listeners and viewers to normal. We're not going to be talking reptile keeping or pet keeping. We're going to be talking rewilding. But before we get into that, I start the podcast with a little section called Get to Know. Now, I've not done it with two people at the same time before, so we'll see how it goes. But basically, I've got a list of 10 this or that questions. Nice and simple. Don't need like explained answers, just nice, snappy to get us in the mood for podcasting. So if you're both happy, we can start.
Yeah,
tell you what, Emma, do you want to answer your ones first so we don't interrupt each other?
Yeah, could do that.
Yeah. Okay, so cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Okay. Do you want to do all of them and then come back, or do you want to?
Oh, let's do them one after another. So mine would be cats to that.
Fantastic. Okay, so one of each. Snakes or lizards?
Snakes for me.
Lizards. lizards.
Okay.
I wonder if we're going to have different ones each time.
It's quite rare for us to disagree on things, so this could be quite interesting.
Frogs or salamanders?
Salamanders.
Salamanders, yeah.
Okay. Spiders or scorpions?
Scorpions.
Scorpions.
Butterflies or birds?
Birds.
Birds. Okay, we're not disagreeing as much as I thought we might.
yeah, there's a few more to go yet, don't worry. Right, moving away from animals, grassland or woodlands?
Grassland, absolutely. Very important ecosystem.
Yeah, do you know? Ooh, yeah, I'd probably also go grassland. I like a grassland.
I think
I like a good grass. I think a good grassland outweighs a bad forest, but then a sort of mid-tier forest for me would outweigh a mid-tier grassland.
Yeah, but I think you're the first two guests out of the 50 episodes I've done, 51 episodes, that has said grassland.
Oh, well, good. Yeah, great.
I like it. It's good. It's good. Next one, beach or mountains?
Mountains.
Mountains. Sorry.
Yeah, we like a mountain. Hot climate or cold climate?
Cold for me.
Hot for me.
Nice.
I am cold-blooded.
I think that's the first cold climate we've had as well. But obviously, most people are reptile keepers, so they like the warmer weather. But I like it. And then this is actually probably the most important question of the entire podcast. What is your favourite biscuit?
I quite like a ginger nut.
Nice.
That's very you. I quite like just a basic dark chocolate digestive.
Oh, a dark chocolate. I'm a milk chocolate digestive.
It's got to be dark.
Oh, okay, I like it. Fantastic. So that's the little that questions. If nothing else, a bit of fun. But we get to all know each other a little bit better. So, Emma, Robi, could you? It's up to you how you want to answer the questions because I'm not sure how it's going to work with the dynamic, but it doesn't matter. We'll make it work. Could you both give me and the listeners a history lesson into yourselves? Where did your passion for animals begin, and how has that journey sort of blossomed into where you're both at today?
Yeah, sounds good. I'm happy to start if that's all right with you, Robi.
Yeah, go for it. Gives me more time to think.
So I grew up in Mexico, so was always kind of very passionate about animals. And I guess growing up somewhere where there's a lot of biodiversity, a lot of really cool animals, that's what got me into it. And then I studied zoology at university with Robi. That's where we met each other. And then through our love of chatting all things animal and conservation, we decided to start a podcast together called Zoology Ramblings. And yeah, from there we just talk about animals all the time, go on adventures. We've been recently to look for wild boar in the Forest of Dean and saw some. We've been looking for otters and seagulls. So we basically do everything wildlife-y together.
Awesome. I love that. I bet growing up in Mexico was cool as well. There's a lot of animals over there.
Yeah,
And,
loads of great animals.
Very cool. And then Robi, yourself?
Yeah, sort of broadly similar, I suppose. I used to want to be a paleontologist. That's where I really sort of started getting going. I remember my first book was like a dinosaur encyclopedia.
Yeah.
But then I sort of came to the conclusion that actually the dinosaurs were all dead. So that might be a little tricky. And so I sort of pivoted to wildlife. Always had sort of like a kind of like a casual interest, and obviously watched all the Attenboroughs and all those things. And then sort of follow the same path as Emma, but we met at Leeds, as she said, doing zoology for undergrad. And then, we did Zoology Ramblings, which sort of started from a long and quite passionate conversation that Emma and I had about trophy hunting or canned hunting of lions. So that's its own podcast. And then we transitioned into wildlife filmmaking for a bit and started the Biome Project. So we made some quite nice films about that. So big film about rewilding. We went and filmed some stuff in South Africa and Zambia. And then I moved to Cape Town for a year and a bit to do my master's. And I specialized as a conservation biologist in spatial and movement ecology of large carnivores, so mainly leopards. But I still really love rewilding, which is what we're going to talk about. And that's sort of where I am now. I'm not actually I'm back in London.
yeah. But in life.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you touched on a few things there that we will go into. I'm gonna we'll go through both your podcasts and a few other bits, and then we'll finish with a grand rewilding finish. I'd like to start with a little dip, for want of a better word, into each of you to get an idea of your sort of day to day, and then we'll finish, like I said, with the main topic of rewilding. So, Emma, we'll start with you. You are currently a wildlife champions coordinator with the Avon Wildlife Trust. That sounds like a cool job. What do you actually do?
It is a very cool job. I love my job. So my day-to-day involves sort of supporting and upskilling people who have some kind of passion for nature or an idea that they want to bring to life, and I help bring that to life. So support a wonderful group of people called Wildlife Champions. So they're anyone really with a passion for nature in their community. So I work a lot in different communities all across the Avon region. So that's like Bristol, Bath, Gloucestershire, that kind of area. Excuse me.
Sure.
And support people with whatever their ideas are. So one champion, for example, wants to build or like create loads of wildlife corridors across Bristol, so creating connecting habitat that animals can move between. And so then I might put on training on, you know, how to identify wildlife or how to set up camera traps. So a lot of my day-to-day is going out various different communities, chatting to people, building up that trust and those connections, and helping those nature-based ideas to come to life. So
Wow.
yeah, really rewarding, and I love it.
Yeah, that sounds really cool, to be fair. We won't go like a deep dive, but I know there are a lot of different wildlife trusts dotted around the UK. Can people get involved if they want to get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a wildlife trust in almost every county. I think Scotland has one wildlife trust that covers the whole of Scotland, but near you there will be a wildlife trust. So you can go on their local social media or website, and all of them will have volunteering opportunities or placements. So you can kind of suit it to whatever your interests are, really. So a lot of our volunteering is around sort of urban food growing and community gardens, but that's because we're an urban wildlife trust, whereas some of the others might be more like, you know, water vole monitoring or more wildlifey and hands-on. But yeah, loads of great stuff to get involved with.
Awesome. So yeah, if you want to go and check it out, go Google your, I guess, county followed by Wildlife Trust and see what's on the websites. Fantastic. And then Robi, you are a zoologist and a conservation biologist. Most of us obviously should know what a zoologist is. I have no idea what a conservation biologist is. So what do you do day to day? What's the job?
So if you think of it, zoology is the sort of the study of animals, which we're all pretty familiar with. Conservation biology is then applying that to help protect them in the wild, or indeed in captive situations. So it's sort of like the applied field tested version of zoology. So it's sort of less concerned with, you know, the breeding habits of you know, lions or flycatchers or jellyfish, and more concerned with, okay, how do we use that information to protect them? So we might look at lion breeding habits in the context of when should we, you know, collar them if we want to understand their movements and things. So it's a very much a sort of applied science, and it's looking for results at the end of the game. So I'm in between jobs at the moment, so my day to day is quite flexible, but I'm sort of doing a few bits and bobs here and there. I'm doing a bit of consulting on what you would consider spatial ecology of jaguars.
Okay.
So basically seeing how jaguar movement is impacted by roads, and that's the sort of difference between conservation biology and zoology. Zoology, we just be looking at, oh, this is how jaguars move.
Yeah.
Conservation biology is thinking, okay, well, they're going to hit these roads. How do we then mitigate that? You know, if they get hit by something like that. So that's a little bit of what I'm up to. I'm also writing up my thesis for publication, which should be exciting. That was on leopard survey techniques in Namibia. So we were field testing lots of different techniques to figure out what's the best way to look for leopards. So that's a lot of time spent on the laptop editing papers. And yeah, whenever I can, me and Emma try and get together and, as she said, sort of, you know, have a little wildlife adventure closer to home. Went looking for the wild boars recently, went looking for some badgers. And yeah, the other part of the day-to-day is obviously podcasting on Zoology Ramblings and Bio.
Exciting stuff. So there we go. I guess that's a small insight into both your day-to-day adventures. I'm sure we could probably do a whole episode just on what you guys do for a living and whatnot, because there's a whole there's so much involved. It's very, very cool. But we will move on because people aren't here for that today, unfortunately. And you're not going to get rewilding yet either, folks. So you just have to sit tight. I stumbled across you both when browsing Spotify for a nature podcast to listen to, and the podcast that I found was Zoology Ramblings.
Oh,
now,
brilliant.
I've been listening for a long time now. I don't know how long I've been listening for, but I have made my way through your entire back catalogue. I am caught up. So we'll do a quick podcast chat, and then we will get to what the people are here for. So why did you guys decide to start Zoology Ramblings specifically?
Well, it was
you go ahead,
as I sort of alluded, we always have these conversations where we get very sort of passionate about what we're working on and what we were studying or whatever. And we did have a particularly long and it was a ramble. As all good conversations do, there was 1 or 2 glasses of wine involved, and we went from A to B to C to D. And then at the end of it, Emma had this idea, and she said, "Oh, we should have recorded that. That was pretty good." And typically I said, "No, don't be ridiculous. No one would ever want to listen to us." And obviously Emma was proven right, not me, because the next time we sat down, we started recording it. So it's always wiser to listen to Emma than me.
Fantastic. I absolutely love your podcast. One I mentioned specifically was the episode you did about hunting, and I didn't know it really, and I was so interested in the podcast. I was like, man, I could listen to that for hours. Like, I learned so much. I learn a lot from every single episode that you release, and one specifically always stands out in my head.
Was it the
for those people that
list out a little bit? Was it the canned hunting one or the trophy hunting one?
Hand hunting one specifically. I hadn't even heard of anything, so I thought it was really interesting.
It's interesting that's the one that you remember, because that is what started this whole podcast. We were talking about that at a kitchen table in Wales, and because it's so complex and you can have so many different opinions about it, we thought, why not delve into it, and we try and be as unbiased as possible. We want to present lots of different sides and then let people make their own mind up at the end of the podcast as to what if there is a argument for these topics.
And in fact, I think that was the first one, wasn't it? So, you've been there from the beginning. Thank you so much for listening and putting up with us. It might not be the first one I listened to,
but it was definitely the one that sticks out the most.
Yeah.
And it was really good. So for those people that are listening that haven't listened to Zoology Ramblings, this is up. You can choose who answers this question, because I'm going to ask the same question for the Biome Project shortly. But could you give us a 60-second elevator pitch? Why should people listen to Zoology Ramblings? And it doesn't have to be 60 seconds. I won't time you.
Do you want to do Zoology Ramblings, or do you want to do Biome, Emma? Up to you.
I can try Ramblings.
You can try Ramblings? All right, go on then.
I'll try. So if you love nature conservation and want to have an opportunity to hear from people who have experience in the field and also studied zoology at university, we want it to be informal chats. We want it to feel like you're in the room with us, and you'll hear us talk about all sorts of environmental and conservation topics, and just love, having listeners all around the world. I feel like there's so much more I can say about that, Robi.
No, I think that works. Nicely done. I like that. So right, we'll keep moving on. I'll keep it progressing. So as I said at the beginning, you don't host one, but you do host 2 podcasts. We've mentioned it a few times. The other podcast being the Biome, the Biome Project. I've listened to a lot of the episodes, but I wouldn't say I listen as religiously as Zoology Ramblings. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the Biome Project is not just a podcast, but you also done a documentary as well.
We did, yes. We made a big film about rewilding in Britain. So the Biome Project was a podcast as part of it, but it's really a sort of educational, relatively small scale, completely free, non-profit platform to talk about conservation. And it sort of quite nicely mirrors the difference between zoology and conservation biology. Zoology Ramblings is very much just us waffling on about things we enjoy, whereas Biome is a bit more, I suppose Zoology Ramblings has also got a conservation focus now, but it's more sort of serious and more applied. And we sort of do much more in-depth research about the different topics. So there is a podcast element, and then there's also a film element. And our biggest film is going to be going up on Water Bear pretty soon. It's called Rewilding Britain. Rewilding a Nation. That was the working title. We managed to go and do some filming in the Netherlands, see some bison, see some lynx, and then back to the UK and talk to some British rewilding experts. It was a really fantastic experience.
Fantastic. I don't really think we need an elevator pitch for that. I think you absolutely nailed
that
it.
Was it.
So if people want to, where can people find both the Zoology Ramblings and the Biome Project?
So Zoology Ramblings is mainly on Spotify, but it does exist on other streaming platforms like Apple Podcasts and wherever else you like to listen to podcasts. And then the Biome Project, we have a website, and also the main platform we use for that is YouTube. So if you just type in the Biome Project, you'll see all the different interviews, documentaries, podcasts, sort of similar to this one. That is a video podcast as well as an audio one. So that's probably the best place to find out about those.
Cool. I'll do my best to put in some links in the show notes below as well.
The Kraken.
Yeah. So awesome stuff. Now I approached Emma initially, but both of you to talk rewilding, as it's a topic that obviously regularly comes up on Zoology Ramblings. I did an episode 46 with Wildlife with Cookie, and we touched very briefly on rewilding at the end of the episode. And I was like, you know what? I'd love to do a whole episode on rewilding. So I'm very fortunate that I literally live a stone's throw away from the Nep estate. And obviously they're rewilding storks, which is awesome. I see them over the house regularly, and I love it.
Fantastic.
So it's sort of that's where the spark ignited, I suppose, for rewilding. But for those that don't know, what is rewilding?
Ooh, that's a tricky question.
I know.
I can give it. We probably both got slightly different definitions.
You can give us a nutshell answer. It doesn't need to be obviously
nutshell answer. Okay.
Yeah.
Rewilding is bringing back nature which has been lost for the benefit of both people and biodiversity. That is the nutshell. It sort of began in sort of two places really. It began in Europe, in the Netherlands, with some experiments at a place called Oostvaardersplassen. It was also began in the US in Yellowstone when they documented the wolf recovery, and in typical sort of Western bias, the Southern African conservation community have been rewilding for the last 20, 30 years, possibly even longer, but just didn't call it that. And so there is a lot of wisdom and a lot of knowledge there that is only now being explored in the way it really should. So it sort of had these three origins. Britain is very, very late to the game. And as I guess most of your listeners probably know, we are the second most wildlife depopulated country in Europe, behind only Ireland. And so we've got a really big challenge ahead of us. You know, we've lost so much. Our ecology and nature is pretty poor. And so rewilding is the attempt to bring that back through a whole load of different processes, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but not just for the benefit of nature, but for people as well.
Fantastic.
So that's my nutshell attempt.
Yeah, I think that. Is there anything you want to add to that, Emma?
I think the only thing I'd add to that, Robi already touched on it, is the idea that because of hundreds of years of persecution and habitat loss kind of at the hands of humans, that's why we need rewilding now. Rewilding often involves reintroducing animals or plants to areas where they used to be, but then mainly because of human pressures or sometimes climatic factors, they're now gone. So then it requires human intervention to bring them back, to make sure that ecosystems are functioning healthily again, because if you remove some of the key species from a landscape, it all starts to fall apart. So I think that's what rewilding is trying to restore.
And there's a sort of there's two prongs to rewilding. There's the active human element, like, you know, because we're an island, we will physically have to be involved with bringing some of these animals in. Like they will never just walk here from Europe. Yeah. But there's also a hands-off element to it. There is an element of letting nature just take control again, taking down the fences, reducing our impact on the land, and just allowing the processes to take off in a way that is actually a bit less hands-on.
Yeah. But it's managed less hands-on, isn't it? Like farmers bringing back hedgerows.
Yeah. I mean, and there's always going to be some management, especially when we start talking about big animals. There is always going to be management, or animals' teeth and or claws. But in general, it's less of an intensive approach than what you might consider. before.
Fantastic. So I mentioned when we started this rewilding chat about the storks at NEP. So NEP have been very successful with their stork project. There's lots of storks everywhere locally to me now. I know they've just released another 30 odd that were bred at Chester, I want to say, and they released those. I actually saw them the day after they released them all in a flock as one. It was really cool.
And are they flying about now? Can you see them?
So they've started crossing the channel now.
Okay.
But they some of the adults are still about, and they will get a few. But like last month, there was loads. They were everywhere, and we walk the dogs at NEP like a lot, so you can walk around like they come. My favorite bit of the storks is when they land in the nest and they greet each other and they do this like chatting thing with their bills. It's really cool, and you can hear it from like miles away as well. It's really loud. But
how is it walking? Oh, sorry.
Go on.
I was just going to say, how is it walking a dog with the free roaming wildlife? Has that ever been a problem? Or
fine, as long as my dog's on a lead.
Okay.
Like the wildlife doesn't care. You can just walk past them. I think the rule there is that dogs have to be on leads anyway. But my dogs are always on lead when we're walking them because they are cheeky to say the least. They wouldn't hurt a fly, but they'd probably chase a horse or a cow. So yeah, best to be safe than sorry. Keep them on the lead. But yeah, the wildlife at NEP doesn't mind at all. Like you can walk through the fields and there'll be longhorn cattle either side of you, and they don't care. The pigs again don't care. The horses are a bit shyer, but yeah, the pigs are really cute. They've got piglets at the moment as well, and they'll almost come running up to you. It's like don't stroke the pigs. They're wild. Don't stroke them. But storks. So. The questions are going to be very sort of vague in one sense of a word because I didn't really know how to approach the subject. But we'll just go with it. So, what is the point in rewilding a bird species such as the stork? Because obviously we've got birds here in the UK, and we've got big birds like the egret and the heron. Why do we need a bird like the stork? What are the benefits?
Do you want to go first, Emma?
You can start, Robi.
Okay. The benefit of bringing back the stork is that there's probably about three main benefits. First of all, because they're a protected species under European legislation, we formally did have a legal obligation to do something about them. Now that we've left the EU, we don't. But if we're thinking about, the species as a whole, obviously the British storks are just one part of that wider population. So adding another stop on their northward migration is always going to be good because they were here originally, and it allows them to have another little population, which makes the bigger population a bit more resilient to things that might imperil them. So that's obviously very good. It's a part of our heritage, it's a part of the heritage of the British Isles to have them here. And in the same way that, I think it's important to protect our countryside and our ancient monuments and the castles and things. It's part of our natural heritage. So it's good to have them back and right to have them back. And as you are a perfect example, how wonderful is it to look up and go, wow, the stork.
They're impressive as well. Like they look big, and then you see them in person and they're massive.
Yeah. And I wonder, Emma, do you want to touch on the ecological sort of the pitch to bring the storks back?
I feel like before that, just one more human thing that I'd like to add, that we've got this history with storks, the idea that they bring babies, or you associate them with joy or rebirth. They have a lot of their sort of cultural element that if it gets people very excited, like you were saying, to have them back. And then ecologically, I don't know with storks in particular over any other animal, but all species play a really important role in that ecosystem, and because they are larger birds, they're sort of that important middle, like, would you say they're like a middle, like omnivorous bird, Robi? That they then predate on like amphibians and smaller things like that. So then it means that the populations of those smaller things then need to be healthy enough to support the storks. And then in the landscapes they create as well, in their nests and things like that, then attracts, other smaller insects and things like this. So it's more not necessarily just the role of the stork on their own, but the fact that they fit into this much wider system that then benefits a lot of other species.
And they really were just, I think a lot of people would admit that the stork is not as sort of ecologically important a player as something like a beaver, but everything in every ecosystem evolved in that context.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what the impact is of that species. You take it out, that context will get a little bit more fragile, and inserting it back in will only improve the situation if done well. And so they are an important part of our biodiversity. And now that we've got them back, it's a good sort of proof of concept. We can do this. We did it well. We did it successfully. Actually didn't cost as much as the initial projections were. So it's a nice sort of proof of concept. Say, actually, hang on, we can do this. It's not just theory.
Yeah, fantastic. We won't deep dive into each species because there's a few I want to talk. So we'll keep it light, but I think that gives us a rough idea of the storks. Obviously, if you want to go and see them, go to NEP. It's really cool. I think it's like a £5 for parking, but it might even be a donation. But yeah, I love NEP, even like the free roaming rest of the stuff.
But very quickly, just before we move on, because we know you're a reptile chat, Emma and I have sort of brushed up on some reptile rewilding examples as well. We have got that in the back pocket if you would like to talk about that.
I'm going to add a note onto here to ask about that before I finish up, because I hadn't even thought about doing that. So I'll just add a note there quickly. Even though my laptop, every time I write rewilding, it changes it to rewinding, but it's fine. So next animal on the list of Ben's rewilding things that he was thinking about bringing up is wild boar in the Forest of Dean. Now, you mentioned that you'd seen them. Why was there a need to reintroduce them? And are we seeing the benefits? Because obviously they are thriving in the forest now.
So actually, it's an interesting one with wild boar because they weren't deliberately reintroduced to the Forest of Dean. And I think under any government, they wouldn't have been reintroduced, because they are slightly problematic. They do dig things up. That's really important, and we'll touch on that. But they are that little bit more destructive in the landscape. So they were initially in farms, mainly for meat. And then a bunch of them escaped, did really well in the Forest of Dean, and it's kind of gone from there.
Right.
But it's really, really good that we have them back in the same way you mentioned the pigs are at NEP. You need those like boar or pigs because they root around. If you go to the Forest of Dean, you just see rooting everywhere where they're snuffling around. So they'll be bringing up all those lovely nutrients from the soil, which will be great. Unearth all these insects as well. Often where the wild boar have been, you've got loads of birds. And just that churning of the nutrients in the soil is so, so important. It's something that nothing else really does in UK landscapes unless we have something like pigs and boar. And that's why NEP has brought in the Iron Age pigs and why most rewilding sites have some kind of pig analogue, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Primal pigs. And the way they do it, they've got this incredible snout, which has got all reinforced with cartilage and stuff in the nose. So they're digging their nose in and flipping it. And they're lifting and flipping really big clods of dirt. I mean, we saw when we went recently, and it does look messy, but nature really hates neat and tidy. Yeah. And what nature really, really loves is a bit of mess. And one of the most important things about boar is that they break up the sort of the structure of the woodland, so that if you're walking through, I mean, I don't live so far from NEP either, but if you're walking through the woods where I am, you see trees and then a carpet of brambles underneath. Yeah. And the reason, and that's not a good thing because that's starving all the other plants out. But the boar go in, they break up that monoculture of brambles and sort of create a mosaic of habitats, and that's good. That's what we love to see. So we're big fans of the boar, although the fact that they were originally farm escapees means that they're classed as feral animals under legislation. So their status is a little bit tenuous. So we need as much support for the boar as we can get.
No, so that's fantastic. Okay, so I didn't realise they weren't introduced deliberately. That's very interesting. And like you say, like when you walk around NEP, you do see where the pigs have been, and it looks really destructive. But I suppose it's like then naturally ploughing it almost.
Precisely.
Yeah. Fantastic.
And they're churning over the nutrients and they're churning over the soil, and it means that you've not just got this layer locked at the top which will never sink down. It's all churned up, and a bit like boar and larger animals as well, where they do that destructive behavior. They create these little micro environments for other things like frogs and insects and stuff to live. So they're actually really, really important. And whenever I go to the Forest of Dean, I think, wow, this looks completely different to other forests.
I've never been myself, but it's somewhere I'd really like to go. Not even necessarily to see the boar, but just to like, it's a good forest, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah, it is.
Fantastic. Right, moving on from the boar, unless there's anything else you want to add, because I've got quite a few things. Now, I know this one you were both very excited about, and that was the reintroduction of bison into the UK. So these colossal animals have been released into an area of Kent, albeit they're fenced in, so they're not completely wild, but they are the closest thing to a wild bison that we've had in the UK for a very, very long time. So what is the benefit of rewilding bison? We've already got cows. What niche are they filling? Because surely we're not going to see wild bison wandering through the woods anytime soon.
No, I don't think we're going to see wild bison wandering through the woods anytime soon, which is a shame. Which is why, I mean, you could probably actually go back and forth about have bison been, reintroduced, or sort of soft launched, as it were. Yeah. But to equate a bison to a cow is not quite the same thing. I mean, we're sort of talking apples and oranges here. If you've got a cow in a field, it's doing one thing, and if you've got a massive bison in a woodland, it's doing something very, very different. And so bison is what we call an ecosystem engineer, which means the animal's got a greater impact on the environment than its numbers would suggest. So even though I think we've got 12 bison at the moment, their impact is so much greater than just having those 12.
Okay. Yeah, and I think just to delve into the ecology a bit more, kind of maybe how they are different to cows. So they are bigger than cows, and what's interesting in Wild Dublin, where they've got an area with just the bison, then they've got an area with a mix of other animals like pigs and cows and ponies, and then they've got an area that humans are managing. So they're going to compare which one does best at the end of it all. And so bison will sort of rub up against trees, which means they'll sort of take down trees, which then opens up clearings, creates these lovely open areas with lots of sunlight where, they'll roll around in the sand as well, these sand baths that they have. And so what's lovely about bison is that they create these lovely pockets. So you've got areas of grassland, clearings, little shrub areas, forest, and it's that kind of like what NEP is, really mixed habitat. It's breaking up the woodland in a way that other animals can't. Right. And even awesome things like in their footprints, when they press down, it then forms pools of water. And in Poland, I think it is, and across much of Europe, they're really good habitats for yellow-bellied toads, or is it frogs or toads, Robi?
Yellow-bellied toads, I thought.
Yeah, I thought it was toads. So even something as small as a toad can then benefit from bison. So they've got this whole lovely mix. Yeah.
And the important thing to note is, even though that sounds similar to what we just described the boar doing, it's happening on a different level and a different scale. So it's not enough to just have one. The boar is a big animal, but it's nowhere near the size of a bison. So it's not pushing down trees the same way bison are. A boar wallow is tiny compared to a bison wallow. So you've got to think about scale as well. And bison are very different to cows. Obviously, domestic cows are grazers. Bison are mixed browsers, so they're not going to be mowing things. They're going to be breaking up the woodland, getting a bit more structure in the forest, lots of mosaic habitats. They're not going to do what boars are going to do, which is rootle up the ground, which is why you need something doing both jobs. And size sort of scales quite well to impact. So you want to make the biggest impact? Get the bison in. They're big. They do the job.
Yeah,
fantastic. That's again really interesting. Something I hadn't really thought about. Wow, I'm just having a brain fart for a moment there.
They do make you go wow. You see them and you think wow.
I know that I've seen them in I don't know, a zoo somewhere, I can't remember, and they are massive. So I remember saying to my wife at the time, imagine seeing those we're walking the dogs at Nep, and then all of a sudden there's a bison. The longhorn cattle are big enough. Bison is ridiculously huge. So, in an ideal world, and everything worked how we want the world to work, would you expect to see bison and, say, wild boar working together in a project in the future? for want of a better way to phrase that?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, Forest of Dean would be a great example of a great place you could reintroduce the bison and have both of them working together. I certainly don't think we'll see bison free living in the UK just roaming about the same way foxes are, because obviously they're massive and that would be a bad idea. But boar, certainly, there are free living populations in Kent, in Dean, some up in Scotland, and they do cause trouble. I wouldn't say that there's any evidence they cause more trouble than other animals we live alongside. They certainly don't cause more trouble than we do for ourselves. So yeah, I think in an ideal world, and bison and boar is not too distant future. I think we'll get there.
That's exciting. And you mentioned that they do cause trouble. So what sort of trouble are we talking? Because I know I am going to touch on apex predators, but it's a pig. What can it do that is a pain?
I mean, I think the main problems, so to speak, with boar is largely a problem of how we manage and have land in the UK. So in most of Europe, there's loads of boar, and you don't really notice them because they're in areas where you don't have as high human populations or as high density of, a lot of the UK is farms. And more farms and more farms. So if you've got wild boar on the edge of farmland habitat, if they get out, they'll be rooting around in fields. So that would be a problem for farmers. They can go under almost anything. They've got fences up in the Forest of Dean, which are completely pointless. They literally just burrow under them. So infrastructure-wise, there might be costs with that. And largely an aspect of common sense, but there have been a few dogs that have been killed by boar. The instance with that was a dog killed a baby boar, and then the mum retaliated and killed the dog. So it's a case of,
justified, to be fair.
Yeah.
And I think most people would, but some people would object to that. Although I would then argue, well, how many dogs kill other dogs per year? It's a lot. To my mind, the main problem with boar is if they get into gardens and dig up gardens. We love our gardens. We put a lot of effort in, and we don't. It's not pleasant.
We are a nation of gardeners.
We are a nation of gardeners. But that's not insurmountable, and that just because that's a potential issue shouldn't stop us from being positive towards the boar. It's just something to factor in, and it's something that could be solved with, a bit of effort. And things take effort, don't they? This idea that we can just have animals and not put any effort in. If we lived by that argument, we wouldn't even have squirrels or pigeons or foxes. We have a relationship with all of these animals, and we can through working together, working with communities, involving everyone who needs to be involved. We could live alongside boar very easily. Certainly, the rest of Europe is fine with it, but that's the problem with Britain. We're an island, so they can't just.
We're quite stuck in our ways as well, I think, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, big time.
Cool. So let's move away from boar and bison. I was going to go straight into apex predators, but you guys mentioned reptile rewilding, and I have no notes in front of me at all. So wow me with reptile rewilding, because I didn't even think about looking up for reptiles. I was going on the route of the things I've mentioned so far.
Emma, would you like to kick it off with the reptile rewilding?
Yeah, I'll kick it off with reptiles. So I wanted to touch a little bit on some of the really cool reptiles that we have in the UK and what's kind of being done there, because I think reptiles are often overlooked, us included. We're biased in that. We talk about the bison and the wolves and the lynx, and actually you forget about the little things. So in the UK, we have 6 native reptile species. We've got 3 snakes and 3 lizards, one of those being the slow worm, but that's just a legless lizard.
I didn't realise it was 3 of each. That's very nice and neat. I like that.
Yeah, it's nice and neat. So the ones we have are the smooth snake, the grass snake, the adder. They're the snakes. And then we've got the slow worm, common lizard, and the sand lizard, other lizards. And really cool reintroduction that's been happening is with the sand lizard. So that's it's our rarest lizard. They about 20 centimeters. They're kind of like stocky and brown, and the males are like bright green in the breeding season. They're really, really cool. But because of habitat loss and the usual lovely human pressures, they were basically driven to extinction across a lot of the UK. They went extinct completely in Wales in like the 1960s. And so ARC, who are the Amphibian and Reptile Conservation Trust, I think, I don't know if they go by trust, they have a really cool project where they're reintroducing these sand lizards. So they've done reintroductions in Wales, they've done them in Dorset, and they've recognised that you need to actually, through captive breeding of sand lizards, that can actually help boost the population. So they need these like open, sunny, sandy places to lay their eggs. And so they go in and they manage the habitat to make sure the sandy areas are there. But actually, it's something crazy, like only 5% of sand lizards will actually survive into adulthood in the wild. Just they're not very good at surviving. So if you have them in captivity, breed them, and then reintroduce them into these areas where they have really good habitat, they can actually do really well. So I think to date, there's been like 9,000 sand lizards that have been reintroduced and seeing successes. They're breeding, they're showing signs that they're doing really well. So just wanted to really spotlight that. But
it's funny that you mentioned sand lizards. Sorry to jump on.
No, go ahead.
So I'm alongside the podcast. I also do like vlogs. I do them every other week if I can. And part of the vlogs I'm doing this year, I'm doing a series on finding all of the native UK reptiles and amphibians.
Cool.
And the only reptile I have left to find is the sand lizard, and
Fantastic.
I cannot find it, and it's doing my head in. Yeah, so although there may be 9,000, but I tell you now, there's none near me.
Apparently, their biggest stronghold is in Dorset, which I know is a big area. So I'm sure there's someone who can narrow it down. But I think about 70% of the population is in Dorset.
There's quite a lot, and there's a lot. There's some, I think, over Bournemouth way. So there have been a few sightings recently in the Surrey Hills, on like the Heathland area, because it's smooth snake habitat as well. And I know people that have seen them there, but I can't find them.
They seem elusive.
Search.
Sorry, say that again.
I said, good luck in your future search. It's maybe a trip down to Dorset's in the works.
Well, I've got until I said I'm going to do it all of them this year, and I'm running out of.
Yeah, you're running out of time.
Yeah, I'm running out of time. So we're getting there. Yeah, interesting. So sorry, I completely took the train of thought there. So yeah, sand lizards, very interesting. You said you were going to start in the UK. So are there other rewilding reptile things that we can hear about?
I mean, in the UK, there's quite a few projects actually with that you could look out for. So there's the Durrell. Let me just check on the species 1 second. So it's the Jersey agile frog.
Right,
So
okay.
it's straying into amphibians.
Yeah, that's fine.
They have a really good reintroduction program with the agile frog. And then there's in Sefton, they're doing a lot with natterjack toads as well. So bringing those back. So yeah, there's quite a lot more happening in the UK than I thought. And I think, Robi, you have an example not from the UK, don't you?
Yeah, I've got one from Madagascar, but sort of very much the other end of the spectrum. We're going from lizards to giant tortoises this time. So obviously Madagascar, as we all know, incredibly biodiverse and rich island ecosystem, very unique fauna. And the giant tortoises of Madagascar were part of this weird and wonderful group of animals that used to live there. There were 17 giant lemurs. There were 3 pygmy hippos, these weird aardvark tenric things, giant fossa, giant elephant birds, and 2 giant tortoises. And the giant tortoises were really, really important because, a bit like as we were saying with the bison and the wild boar, except that there's no mammals on Madagascar, no ungulates in Madagascar, nothing like a deer or an antelope or a bison. So the tortoises were doing that role. They were munching on foliage, trampling vegetation, and really importantly, dispersing seeds. And this helped to maintain the health of the forest. But when humans arrived in Madagascar around 2,300 years ago, the tortoises and all the other large animals went extinct. And when you take those animals out of the ecosystem, there's nothing to keep the plants in check. And indeed, beyond the plants, nothing to sort of maintain those interactions between ecosystems and fire, which became a really big problem in Madagascar. And all the links between rivers, forests, fire, all those things start to break down. because of humans, there's now no animal on Madagascar big enough to swallow and then transport the seeds of the baobab tree, the really famous fat tree with the thingies in the air. So now the baobabs can't spread. And,
little thingies in
the branches, that's it. So because we've lost these big animals, the baobabs now can't spread. And so the whole ecosystems of Madagascar have been changing. And all those other animals, I mentioned the giant lemurs, the pygmy hippos, they're gone for good. But the tortoises are basically still around. So the Madagascan giant tortoises are close cousins to Seychelles giant tortoises, which are still around, thankfully. It's the second largest species of tortoise in the world. So, small, chest of drawers size, can live for 100. I didn't know. I was going to say like the size of a small car, and then I was like, no, that's obviously not true. And then I looked, and I was,
it depends how small the car is. To be fair, like, so I'm worn the right T-shirt for today, but like the Galapagos tortoises are like the size of what those little BMW. I think they're called Peel P50s, the little tiny little bubble cars. So you're not technically a small car.
So the rewilding plan is to take these Aldabra giant tortoises in the Seychelles, reintroduce them to Madagascar, see if they can do the job of the extinct Malagasy tortoises. So I think the project started in 2018, and I think by now 300 young tortoises have been moved to Madagascar. And they're a really good species to work with. Like, they're not like boar or bison, which are, big and potentially dangerous or, knock down fences. Like, they're tortoises, they're really slow. It's really easy to keep them in a fenced area and look after them. Easy to monitor with tracking devices, pretty resistant to disease. And then a key goal has been to try to get the tortoises to reduce fire.
Okay.
And you might think, how do tortoises do that short of giving them fire extinguishers?
Well, they just all got hoses now.
So the tortoises eat the grass and they eat the dry leaves on the forest floor. Fire needs fuel. So if they've taken away that fuel layer, which they used to do back in the past, now suddenly we can have fewer fires. And obviously now we have something which can eat the baobab seeds and transport the baobab trees.
Fantastic.
So, I mean, potentially quite interesting for your listeners in the sort of reptile husbandry world. The first 12 giant tortoises, 5 males, 7 females, arrived, reproduced within the first year. Since then, they've had 152 babies, but they raise them in captivity so that their shells are hard enough when they get released, so they don't just get eaten by like feral cats and dogs. The goal is to have around about 500 tortoises by 2030 and around 2,000 by 2040. So It was a really nice little rewilding example, bringing in some little reptiles as well. I say little reptiles, the biggest reptiles.
Massive reptiles.
Massive reptiles,
yeah. Fantastic. I had no idea. I in all my research that I was researching the rewilding stuff, I didn't even think to check for reptile rewilding. So fantastic. Thank you very much for bringing that to my attention. I'm sure the guys and girls listening will have appreciated that as well. My wife loves the tortoise as well, so she'll be well happy to hear that. So moving away from the animals that we've mentioned before, I want to move on to some animals that you hear come up quite a lot when talking about rewilding, but they aren't they're probably not going to happen. I'd like them to happen, but they're not going to happen. So I'm talking lynx, wolves, bears. So we'll start wolves and bears and we'll finish the podcast with lynx.
Okay.
So wolves and bears. There's plenty of sparsely populated land in Scotland. Could it support the introduction of wolves and bears? And wolves or bears?
Ecologically, yes. The human element is the stickler.
Yeah.
But ecologically, for all three of those species, yes.
All together at the same time?
Yeah, probably not in the same places, though.
Yeah.
Probably the lynx would live in the more forested areas. Wolves would probably be on the hills. Bears, I'm sort of less sure about.
Yeah. Interestingly, I feel like in that order that you read them out is probably the order that they would come back. So lynx are the most likely. Then wolves, I think we need from an ecology point of view, but would take the most convincing. Yeah. And bears, no one's seriously considering it in the UK, even though they are really important.
Yeah. It would be cool, but they're like, there's not a lot
Be
of
so
places in the
cool.
UK that there aren't people, which is a shame. But so, wolves and bears. I know that in parts of Europe, and you mentioned it as well, Yellowstone National Park, they worked hard to grow the population of wolves back. They are seeing the benefits, but what benefits are they seeing now the wolves are back? Let's say Yellowstone, for example, because that was a big project.
Yeah, Yellowstone's sort of very much the classic example for wolf reintroduction. And the whole idea behind wolves is they trigger what we call a trophic cascade, which is basically you reintroduce one really, really important species and you see positive knock-on effects all across the food chain. So when the wolves left Yellowstone, there was nothing to eat the deer. The deer multiplied beyond control. The deer overbrowsed the forests. The forest health went down. Because the forest health went down, you had more soil erosion, which changed the course of rivers, which meant that the beavers went extinct. So the river health went down. So just by knocking out the dog at the top, you have a massive bad impact on the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
Britain almost certainly underwent that when we lost the last wolves. Actually, probably before due to human impact. But we now are in a similar situation to Yellowstone before the wolf was brought back. So empty hillsides in Scotland. You know, it used to be a much
Way
more
too many deer.
way too many deer.
There's
Pretty
deer
sorry
everywhere.
state of our rivers. It's probably a reach to say that reintroducing a few wolves is going to solve all of those problems. However, it's one part of a bigger solution.
Yeah.
And when Yellowstone brought the wolves back, they started predating on the deer. Deer numbers went down, but it's actually less about controlling deer numbers and more about controlling deer behavior. Suddenly, the deer don't want to spend so much time in the forest because they get ambushed, so the trees can come back, so bird populations go back. So, you know, soil is better, so rivers are better, and the beavers come back, and it's a whole thing.
It is amazing. Like I'm sure I read somewhere that the wolves coming back literally changed the way the rivers were flowing. Like it's mad to have such an effect from some. Like if someone told me go and put these big scary dog things back over there and the rivers will change, I'd go, you're having a laugh. Yeah, it's amazing how just that one thing has so many knock-on effects. But likewise, it also has the opposite when you take them away. Yeah, which is fantastic. But do you think it would work? Well, let's do wolves specifically because I don't think bears are ever going to happen. Do you think it could happen in the UK, or if it were to happen, where would they start? I presume Scotland because there's just less people.
Yeah, I think they'd start in Scotland, and there's somewhere called Allerdale up in Scotland, and they're probably the most serious people who are looking at wolf reintroduction. So I think a lot of that will have to start with engaging landowners, the community. I mean, if we're bringing species back, we need to make sure that the threats that drove them to extinction in the first place are at least reduced, even if they're not gone. So need to make sure there's good compensation schemes in place. So wolves will take livestock, they will, not in huge numbers, but farmers need to know that they can be compensated if they lose their sheep. We've talked about this with lynx as well. You could have geo collars where, you know, if a wolf enters within a certain boundary of farmland, the farmers could be notified. There could be rangers that go and either scare away the wolf or make sure the farmer receives the money or some sort of compensation. Until those systems are put in place, I don't think the UK will be ready, but I think it will be, just not quite yet.
We'll have wolves in our lifetime. I don't bet, but I would be willing to put like 250 on it. But
we will, bit, not enough to make but a little bit of cash.
Yeah, we will have. I think we will have both wolves and lynx free living in the UK in our lifetime. But for both of those species, it's not about habitat suitability, and it's not about prey. It's about human suitability. And we can do that, as Emma has said. There are lots and lots of things we can try. And if we're going to be serious about this, we need to build those strategies alongside and with the input of the people who are going to be living next to them. And sort of they've got to be the people building it in a way. You've got to tailor it so it's their needs specifically are met. But there's nothing ecologically that says we can't have wolves or lynx.
Okay.
In fact,
And
there's been a
we're
pretty good
talking-
paper recently, which I say recently, a couple of years ago, that modelled habitat suitability for lynx and found that there is habitat, and I don't doubt the same for wolves. And there's prey.
Yeah,
it's
there's
just
plenty.
about
There's
people.
plenty of deer. So we mentioned wolves, and the conversation obviously is very much wolves and lynx. So I'm presuming their needs are very similar in the aspects of rewilding them, or you're shaking your head. So I'm going to say I'm not. They're not.
I would say quite different, actually.
Okay.
Lynx are typically so they're two different kinds of predators. So wolves are pursuit predators, so they'll find prey and run it down. Lynx are ambush predators, so they'll hide and wait for prey to come to them and sneak up on it. They're different sizes. So lynx are, they're sort of maybe like a border collie size. Like it's not a big animal. It's no threat to people. Wolves are, big dog size. It's actually quite interesting. You think wolves are like giant dogs. They're not. They're big dog size, but they're not. It's not like Game of Thrones, and very different in terms of habitat. So lynx are typically what we consider forest species, going for different prey. They're going for roe deer, they're going for squirrels, things like that. Wolves will be going for bigger deer. I think the wolf definitely has a much greater potential for predating livestock than the lynx. And so actually the strategies you build to live with both of those animals are going to be quite different.
Right, okay. All right. So, that's... I thought they were quite similar, so that's interesting. Obviously, I haven't done a bucket load of research, but that's why we have these conversations, to learn. So, let's move away from wolves, and we'll finish up with lynx. Unless there's anything specific you want to add about wolves now.
Actually, one last thing about wolves is that you can't just have one wolf.
Yeah.
You need packs. And if you want... Introducing one pack of wolves is very different to introducing multiple packs of wolves. And obviously, if you want a healthy breeding population, you need multiple packs.
Yeah.
Whereas with lynx are solitary. So you reintroduce 30 lynx and that's a population. You reintroduce 30 wolves and that's not a population. So there's a bit of a logistical thing going on there.
No, that's something, again, that's something that I wouldn't have thought of, but it makes perfect sense. And obviously, you don't want, like with wolves, you don't want them to be sort of inbreeding because they are in one small pack, whereas the lynx, as solitary animals, it's rare that they'll come across each other as often. So besides that, what is it that makes the lynx the best option, so to speak, to be, I suppose, the first predatory animal that we could introduce?
I mean, we've spoken to quite a few conservation professionals, and several of them think we could have lynx in the next 5 years.
Oh, wow,
and
that's cool.
if that would happen, that'd be amazing. We'll have to see. But I think why they're looking quite suitable is, I think one of the reasons is their size. So they could quite easily slip away into the shadows of our landscapes, into the woods, and we'd hardly ever see them. They're not like wolves. You wouldn't hear them vocalize as much. You'd see signs that they were there, but largely solitary, would kind of disappear in and out of the landscapes. They wouldn't take as many sheep. And yeah, I think they're a predator that people could get excited about, but be slightly less scared of. As soon as you say wolf, people immediately have their hackles up and go, I wouldn't want to live alongside a wolf. Whereas lynx, I don't know why it's different. Maybe we've just forgotten a bit more how to live alongside lynx. There's less stories. It's not Little Red Riding Hood and the lynx. I don't know any any childhood books about lynx. So I think it would be we'd be starting from scratch almost with how to live alongside them again. And that presents an opportunity.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that obviously wolves they're always the bad guy, be it like the big bad wolf in Red Riding Hood, like you say, or you get films like Twilight where you get the werewolves. And if people think wolf, they think something like that, like massive, terrifying, is going to jump out the woods and eat you, your dog, your family. Whereas lynx, I think because they're not spoken about, most people don't even really know. If I asked, I don't know, 10 people, I imagine this is a statistic I'm completely making up off the spot, where 6 out of those 10 people couldn't describe a lynx to you. So I think, and a lot of people imagine it as like a small cat, like a Scottish wildcat type animal. Obviously, they're bigger, but people don't know that.
I mean, Emma's hit the nail on the head. The lynx, we don't have a relationship with the lynx. We do with the wolf.
Yeah.
And I think that's because, we build a relationship with animals that are significant to us. We have a relationship with wolves because they ate our sheep back in the day. We heard the howls at night and stayed up around the fire worrying about that. We have a relationship with bison because they're massive and we ate them. And we have a relationship with indigenous people have a relationship with salmon in North America because that's a really important part of their culture and their food. But we don't have a relationship with lynx, and Emma's exactly right. It's because you don't ever see them.
Yeah,
we don't eat them. They don't eat the same things we eat. You barely see them because they're basically ninjas. They're not a threat to us. They're not really. I mean, they will take a little bit of our livestock, but nothing compared to the amount of sheep that are killed by domestic dogs every year. And they tucked away in the corner. And we certainly didn't notice when the last lynx went extinct in Britain. We wrote it down when the last wolf got.
yeah.
But I think Emma's completely right. We have a chance to reset a relationship from the ground up with the lynx, whereas wolves have got they've got bad press unfairly, but it's there. And once you've got bad press, it's hard to get that off.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And then obviously you mentioned that they will take livestock very occasionally. We're talking lynx. I have a couple of friends actually that are shepherd farmers or sheep farmers, shepherds, and their main problem comes in the form of red kites and badgers, especially around lambing. That's the thing that gets the most animals, gets the most like lambs, is that they have a problem with badgers, and then the badgers all tend to injure an animal, and then the red kites come and finish them off. So I don't think if there's a lynx living nearby, they'll notice one, maybe two extras. I don't think it'd be an issue, but I imagine obviously there will be a lot of concerns from the glorious general public when it comes to reintroducing a predator such as the lynx. And I imagine a lot of that backlash comes from farmers because they obviously don't want to lose their sheep or whatever it is. But are there any, I don't want to say realistic concerns because obviously it is a realistic concern to the farmers, but are there any other realistic concerns around the reintroduction of a lynx, for example?
They're no threat to people.
Not
at all. I mean, obviously, if you poked one, don't do that. But in the same way, you wouldn't poke a big dog or a horse. But they're
if we're talking wild animals, I suppose a fox. You wouldn't poke a fox.
Yeah, you wouldn't poke a fox. Why would you poke a lynx? And so there are no threat to people. But I think it's important to note that the livestock issue with farmers is a realistic concern. And it can't just be something that's brushed under the table. If we're serious about this, we need to sit down with farmers and talk to them and say, right, what's your concern? Why are you concerned? Right, okay, let's mitigate that. And the reason lynx are going to be easier than wolves is because lynx and sheep don't live in the same places. Yeah. Sheep farming in the uplands of Scotland is open hillsides sheep. Yeah. Lynx are not creatures of open hillsides. We know they're more adaptable than just forests. In Europe, they live in mosaic habitats, mountains and the odd grassland, but they're not a creature of the moors. So there's going to be less conflict there. Where the sheep and the lynx do overlap, it's possible that lynx will take sheep. In fact, probable. They will do that, But again, the scale of those losses compared to the scale of losses of sheep that just, die of natural causes every year and die because of dogs being off leads or, all the other myriad reasons that sheep die.
Yeah.
And there are a lot, is, it's tiny. It's tiny right. Compared to that. And also we're quite good at living alongside predators if we're ready for it. We can have guard dogs in the fields. We can corral our livestock at night. Going back to the old roots of farming, the really old stuff that we used to do. As Emma said, there won't be many lynx. We can put a collar on each and every one of them. The moment it comes into farmland, you can get a text on your iPhone. Oh, get on your quad bike. There's a lynx out. Scare it off. And if you lose a sheep to lynx, okay, well, we can geotag. If there was a lynx in your field, we know because we've got the collar. We'll pay you for the sheep, or we'll give you another sheep, or might turn out that it wasn't a lynx, and then we've got to think about our dog problem. Actually, is what we've really got to think about, And there's we can live alongside them, but I think we shouldn't minimize the livestock issue. That's a really important issue, and farmers need to be brought in. They need to be part of the solution. They need to build the solutions with us. Aside from the livestock,
one of the best solutions. I think it wasn't for lynx specifically, but they have guard llamas.
This was for wolves, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, you can have guard llamas in your field, which are apparently really good at protecting livestock and alerting you of any predators. So
guard donkeys. Someone was using guard donkeys. I think they were using donkeys to safeguard sheep in Argentina from mountain lions. So if a donkey can fight a mountain lion, it can fight off a wolf.
Yeah, a llama can deal with a wolf. That's fantastic. Guard llamas. I like that. I like it. Yeah, that's fantastic. So, we have been going a while, so we will start to slowly wrap up now. There are a few more questions I want to ask you. But do you think, obviously you mentioned possibly in the next 5 years for lynx, but do you think that in our lifetimes, realistically, we will see a reintroduction of lynx, wolves, and bears?
I want to say yes for lynx and wolves, no for bears. I don't know about you, Robi.
I would probably agree with you on that. Yeah.
I'd like to think that wolves and lynx will be back. I don't know enough about it. I don't think that we need a bear. Like, they may have a very fantastic role in the ecosystem, but I think there's too many people, and bears are big. Bears are scary.
And I think bears are more difficult to live alongside than wolves.
Yeah.
There's very little problems with wolves and people in North America, whereas, and I mean that wolves and people, not wolves and livestock, wolves and people.
Yeah.
Whereas, bears, you got to have pepper spray, you got to, they get in the gardens. They're not an easy animal.
They're in your bins, they're on your porch, they're on your trampoline.
They're in your pool.
Exactly. The last thing you want to do is get up for work and there's a bear in your bin.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, so let's finish up this rewilding chat. I have got a few other questions as well, but the last rewilding question I want to ask you both is, which animal would you guys like to see reintroduced into the British Isles? It doesn't have to be realistic, and it doesn't even have to be anything, I say reintroduced, something that has a history of being here at some point in history. What would you like to see back in the British Isles?
This is going to be a really silly and impractical answer,
fine.
But
are we doing silly and impractical? Should we do that?
Silly and impractical is perfect.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go for rhinos and elephants because they used to be in our landscapes. Our trees are adapted for elephant browsing, and the way our hedges grow is all because of elephants. So we're a long way away from the bear. We're a very long way away from the elephant, but I'm going to say elephant because our landscapes are meant to have them.
Fantastic.
I quite fancy a cave hyena, but that would be even more tricky than wolves and bears. No, I actually, genuinely, I think if you gave me all the money in the world to do a harebrained scheme, I would, buy a piece of land and I'd put some elephants on it, and I would see how they coped in British ecosystems. For, as Emma said, we did used to have elephants in Britain. We had 2 species of mammoth and we had 1 species of elephant until really not that long ago. So yeah, I'd have my little bit of land and I'd pop a little herd of elephants on, and I'd just see what happens, Yeah. And it might turn out that actually no, too much time has passed, or the elephants are too distantly related to what we used to have, and it wouldn't work. But you never know,
That's cool. Maybe we need to just drop Nep a little email.
Yeah, the plants remember. Plants have long memories. They really do. The trees really remember. I mean, our trees, if you look at the distribution and behavior of our trees in Britain, our trees still think it's the last ice age. So they clearly haven't forgotten the elephants. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's just we're missing the elephants. The trees are waiting for them to come back.
I think they are. Yeah.
Fantastic. Right. This is the last official question of the podcast. There is another question after it, but it's like the wrap-up question of the podcast. I ask all my guests this. So I don't know how it will go with the pair of you, because obviously you're not reptile keepers yourself, but it doesn't matter. So space, time, money, legality, all that sort of jazz is not an issue at all. Which animal, not necessarily reptile, animal as a whole, would you like to keep as a pet or a companion?
Okay, I actually have an answer for this. Pig.
Okay. Any particular
I'd love a pig. Yeah, not a wild boar, because that'd be a lot of hassle.
Yeah.
But like just
You're
like
digging up your garden.
yeah, and not like one of those pink food pigs, but like a proper pig, like a
Yeah, I like a Mangalitsa pig, the big furry ones.
yeah. I just feel you said as a companion, and I was
Yeah,
thinking,
yeah,
realistically, I love animals, but I'm not really a pet person.
yeah.
I don't really like touching and feeding animals. I'd much rather just know they're there and look
Yeah.
at them in a distance. So I've never been a pet person, but there's something about just having a pig, I'd like that. It'd make me
Nice.
happy.
Cool.
That
Anna?
sounds good. I'd probably want some ducks actually, because they're apparently really good at eating slugs in the garden. So I could just have some free roaming ducks eating my
Yeah.
slugs, and then I could grow my vegetables. And yeah, I'd be quite happy with some
Fantastic.
ducks.
To be fair, my wife and I really want a small. I don't know what the collective noun is, but for the sake of the conversation, my wife and I really want a small herd of Indian runner ducks, but my landlord won't let
cool.
me have them because, like you say, they eat slugs and they're really cool. I love ducks, so yeah, I like that. We got two very different answers, and different from every answer I've had previously on the podcast as well. So ducks and pigs. There we go.
I'd be happy with a pig, I really would actually. I'm
Yeah.
not joking. I actually would be quite happy with a pig.
You've been watching Babe too much.
Yeah.
And finally, this is your opportunity to plug yourselves. So where can people find you?
Would you like to go first, Emma?
Yeah, so the main place you can find me is on Instagram. So I'm Emma Hodson Wildlife. I'm a very sporadic poster, but I share a lot of things about wildlife, conservation, all sort of things like that. And Zoology Ramblings, if you look us up on Spotify, is the main place where you can hear us ramble even more about wildlife and these kinds of topics. So that's the main places for me.
And for me, very originally, I am Robi Watkinson Wildlife on Instagram, at Robi_Watkinson_Wildlife. And yeah, Zoology Ramblings is on Spotify, as is the Biome Project podcast. If you want more information, you want to watch the Biome Project films and videos, YouTube or www.biome-project.co.uk is our website. So that's where we can be found. That's where we inhabit in the internet.
Fantastic. Well, there we have it. I'll do my best to pop all of the links mentioned down below. If I haven't got one, or we've mentioned something in today's podcast and there isn't a link, just drop me a DM and I will make sure I put you in the right place. Robi and Emma, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think we could have dived a lot deeper and made this like a 3, 4, 5 hour podcast, but I think we managed to just dip our toes in enough that we hopefully got some brains thinking. But now, unfortunately, we do have to say goodbye. Please, both of you, hang around in the green room afterwards, and I'll have like a little debrief once I've wrapped this episode up. But thank you very, very much for coming on. I've thoroughly enjoyed this.
Thank
you so much. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Right. Well, folks, there we have it. After a few weeks off, we're back with a huge bang. Absolutely loved that episode, and I love the topic of rewilding. Hopefully, it has sparked some interest for you all too. Like I said at the top of the show, if you're able to support the show a little bit more, there is a link to the Patreon. If it starts at it starts at as little as £1 a month. And there's even a 7-day free trial. Of course, not everybody is able to support financially, so please consider the following 3 ways of supporting the podcast. You can like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. And if you're an audio listener, please consider giving the podcast a rating. And if you're on Spotify, I don't know if you can do it on others, but on Spotify, you can follow it as well. And of course, you can follow me on all social media platforms except for Twitter, because I don't understand Twitter. Just search for ReptiChat. That is all from me today. I have been Ben McIntyre. This has been a ReptiChat podcast. I'll see you in a fortnight. Goodbye.